First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we're going to give out some updates on the coronavirus, just how it's affecting our jails nationally, internationally, our jails and our prison system. And of course, we do have a lot to cover, and I have my partner in crime with me today, Russ Hamilton. What's up, Russ? You there?
Yes, I'm here, Anthony. How are you today?
Good, Russ. It's because we keep on having a bad connection. I think tomorrow I'm going to go out to Best Buy, see if I can pick up like a Wi-Fi booster or something. We're going to have to go with pictures of Russ today because he keeps freezing in these awkward poses. But Russ, do you mind?
I'm also broadcasting from a super secret location deep in a bunker from someplace I can't discuss.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes, that is absolutely what it is.
So you're preparing for the end of the world.
Absolutely.
We're supposed to be positive, Russ.
Okay, I'm being positive again. Just joking, people. Just joking.
Okay, so Russ, you mind introducing yourself to our audience again?
Not at all. My name is Russ Hamilton. I have 27 years of experience with California Department of Corrections. Started my career all the way back in 1989 at San Quentin State Prison. And then eventually I transferred, promoted to sergeant, and then I retired. And then after I retired, I found out that I couldn't stand staying still, something I kind of already knew. And so I went ahead and went back to work for a small juvenile detention facility in Northern California. And now I just, I hang out on Keepers of Chaos. That's Chaos with a K, which is my venue, and produce, great content, knowledge, history, and stuff for corrections professionals like most of you listening out there are. And I also hang out with Anthony and do some stuff for Tier Talk, and I think it's great. I think we're the best two venues out there.
Appreciate that, Russ. I'll be honest with you, Russ. I kind of miss your face right now.
I know. Secrecy is everything, though. Need to know.
Russ has gone underground. Hey, so when we come back from our sponsors, we're going to read off some of the latest things that we have happening across the country, international too, because I got some news from Ireland, which I found was pretty interesting. And just giving some updates to try to give people reality as opposed to the sensationalism of the news. So we'll read the articles, then me and Russ, if we have some input, we'll give some input in there. Okay, guys, so if you're having the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We'll go to our sponsor, and we come back. We'll break down some news, some updates on what's going on with coronavirus, COVID-19. Stand by for our sponsor.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, Inmate Manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate Manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
And we're back. Hey, Russ, real quick, I wanted to start off with this interesting article. It comes from independent.ie. It's coming out of Ireland. And the title is Prison Officer Suspended After 100 of Face Mask and Medical Equipment Go Missing. A prison officer has been suspended with immediate effect after it was discovered that between 220 to 250 units of Irish prison service-owned personal protective equipment have gone missing. The officer picked up a shipment of the vital PPE, including protective face masks, at a prison earlier this week. The shipment was destined for a drop-off at a number of prisons later on the same day. I'll be honest with you, right now, if I know of an officer that's doing that, that's taking the personal equipment and bringing it home, I would have a severe issue with that, because at the end of the day, you know, you're also not given the chance to protect your brothers and sisters in that working environment. It's a very selfish move, even though we're in desperate times. To me, that's very unacceptable. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, you know, when you're missing that many, when you're missing that much stuff, I mean, that's more than just a mask or something that you're setting aside for yourself for later. You know, I think that this thing has really gone on to reveal some people. And, you know, there's been some, you know, other hoarding issues and theft issues with this stuff, and some price gouging and other things. And you know what? None of that is helpful to the overall crisis as it is. You know, this stuff really, you know, stops us from being as effective as we could and should be. So, man, nobody should be doing something like that. And this person, they're getting what they deserve. They're thinking in the short range instead of the long range, and looking out for their fellow workers.
Russ, you mentioned a key thing, man. Desperate times does really bring out the truth in people, though. It really does. When people are dominated by fear, we find out if they're going to really just step up and do what they got to do, hopefully help others, or if they're just going to worry about themselves. And in our position, working in corrections, we have to make that sacrifice, or else we shouldn't be in this profession. And Russ, I think that goes the same way too when you're on a unit and shit hits the fan and you look at your partner and you're wondering what my partner going to do. Is my partner going to stay with me, or is my partner only going to worry about themselves?
Yeah, you know, this is a business where you're very interdependent on other people for your safety. You know, you have to know that gunner up in the tower or on the gun walk is going to know what to do. You got to know that your partner knows what to do, and that people are going to, you know, basically they're going to, you know, raise hell to get you back out of danger if that's what it takes. And, you know, I've been in a lot of situations in my career where I'm just thankful that there were people there that came and bailed me out, because if they hadn't, I wouldn't be here speaking to you today.
Right. And this is, again, just a good test to see who we really are and if we are capable of going through this. And that's why I'm trying to make sure that if we do have concerns, the concerns are realistic and not sensationalized, because right now we're spending a lot of time trying to balance out those unrealistic concerns versus, you know, this is what you really need to worry about. And we have to make sure that our resources are focused on what really is reality as opposed to what can be sensationalized. And I'll tell you something, we have to do that every day. Every day you're going to find yourself in a position where something gets released by the news, and then you have to go back and tell staff, hold on, guys, hold on, slow it down. Don't run with that, because this is what it really is. But you have to get to them before they get convinced otherwise, because if they're convinced otherwise, then they tend not to believe you. Hey, Russ, let me ask you a question. So I'm reading the Times-Union right now, and this is out of New York State. Albany Training Academy told to double up classes amid pandemic. Now, mind you, guys, there is an issue here. Right now, we could be running out of staff, however drastically, because don't forget, guys, if people test positive for the coronavirus, we are quarantining bulks of people at a time. And in corrections, obviously, you need to have people stand in those posts. And it's tough for management, because management has to try to maintain order, try to maintain staffing, but also have to make sure that they do what's right by each employee. If they're sick or they have to be quarantined, you got to get them out. So the Albany Training Academy, just a little bit, let me read an article real quick. While schools and college campuses close across New York, the Albany Training Academy on New Scotland Road continues to train hundreds of recruits. The State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision's Academy on the outskirts of the city has doubled up classes amid the coronavirus pandemic, which has shuttered businesses and limited large gatherings to slow the spread of COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus, according to the DOCCS email obtained by Times-Union. Now, DOCCS officials say Correctional officers are considered essential staff for the state, and so they've shortened the 8-week residential academy in order to graduate these essential personnel early. The academy trains thousands of recruits to staff facilities across the state, and the academy currently has the capacity to house 125 trainees on campus, a capacity DOCCS is looking to more than double through a current expansion. DOCCS officials said they increased the number of classrooms to ensure instructors and trainees can maintain a 6-foot social distancing protocol, but officials did not elaborate on the specific number of recruits nor how many are in the class. Now, this was quoted by, looks like the Albany County Legislature Chairman Andrew Joyce, says, "I don't know how you can hold a class when groups of 10 or more are prohibited. If training continues at the DOCCS facility, it should end immediately for the safety of the staff there, the trainees, and the community at large." What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Well, I think that while they have a point about maybe not being able to maintain that, I think that we have to keep in mind where the real dangers may lay. And if you have a bunch of people in the academy, I'm sure that means that probably most of them are fairly young and in fairly decent condition. And if we have situations out there in our jails and prisons where we're so short-staffed that we're going to end up, having riots or escape attempts and hostage situations, we need to fill some positions out there. So while I understand the safety on one side, I think that in a situation like that, the virus is far more manageable than running completely short-staffed out at those facilities.
Well, let me ask you, Russ. First off, I agree with you. I think at this point we need those numbers, so it's great to, maybe to have some people go through training. But what about if you just did what needs to be done? You just, okay, trainees right now, you can't leave. You have to stay on site, and that goes for the trainers as well. And then also in the classroom, if you have multiple classrooms, you don't have everybody bulked into one classroom. You're still able to facilitate the training and maintain social distancing. I mean, I think at these measures, or what's going on, these measures actually may be needed or required. And for that person to quickly say that, this shouldn't be happening. If training continues at the DOCCS facility, it should end immediately. Obviously, they're not aware that there may be an immediate need to fill those numbers at these facilities that could be sending people home in the masses.
Well, we also have this thing lately called technology, and technology can allow us to do some distance learning under those situations. I would imagine. I mean, it's a academy facility for schooling as it is. That certainly they have internet. Certainly they could get a hold of some iPads or some laptops. And so if they couldn't meet that social distancing within the class, I don't see any reason why they couldn't do it by some distance learning software and things like that. So I don't know. It sounds to me like this person is maybe overhyping the situation a little bit, but I haven't been there, so I don't know. But that's what I would try first. I would look at some alternatives and some solutions rather than just throwing my hands up in the air and deciding that it's impossible.
Well, Rachel Connor, she's the spokesperson or a spokeswoman for the DOCCS. She said in an email, "These ongoing training efforts do not pose a threat to the community as the academy is self-contained, and especially at this time conducts all activities on academy property." But I do want to tell you, New York is the highest in the country with coronavirus confirmed cases, and Jersey right behind it. The number of New York confirmed cases rose another 7,681. So guys, right now it's March 28th. So the number went from 44,635 to 52,318 with 728 deaths. So obviously New York is a hot spot. But again, I think there's a need for numbers right now because we could be sending people home in the masses. So I understand why there could be some desperate act to get people through. But again, like Russ said, maybe you could do it, through some type of distance learning. Or again, you keep the academy quarantined, including the instructors. And I'm sorry, it is what it is. And then once the academy is complete, you can send those recruits out to the facilities. I mean, let me tell you something. These new boots will be going right into something extreme. But I think at this point, we're going to need bodies because I know for a fact management's going to be scrambling every time they got to send a bunch of these individuals home when one person tests positive for the coronavirus. So, Russ, you mentioned something in Was it Sacramento?
I'd been looking around and checking on what CDCR is doing with regards to their academy. Now, I was told that their last academy, which I'm not sure when that one had graduated, but I was told that they were being kept on campus, but they're gone now apparently, and they have now announced that they have postponed or and suspended their next academy class, which was supposed to be starting the end of this month.
I think people are starting to think like, you know what, we're going to be losing staff, and I think that even though people may be shutting down the academy, because I understand that for obviously for health concerns, but I think people are going to realize, hey, we may need these numbers and we may need to speed up the academy. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, I can understand both causes for concern, but I think at this point here, if we need the essential staffing and we're not going to lock down these facilities like I think we should, I think the facilities should be locked down and just kind of limit the traffic altogether and then pay for these officers to kind of 24 hours. Yes, they get 8 hours of rest or 12 hours of rest, but I think we should try to keep the same staff in and then just, and trust me, if you motivate these officers and you give them the right pay, they're going to step up and be there. But if we're not going to lock it down, then we have to be prepared that we're going to lose people. And if we're going to lose people, maybe we're going to have to get those academies done to get that number. Because if not, the sad thing is, I hope this doesn't happen, but when we start running out of custody, I mean, who's going to start taking place? Civilians?
Yeah, it's a thing where it's going to be one of those patchwork networks for a while. I hope that when they bring those particular people online, that they're able to put them into spots that are not as critical. And not that there's any non-critical spots, but there are some that are less intensive to having experience and full training.
A little side note, this kind of goes outside the story of coronavirus, but did you know that was Friday? So what was Friday? The 27th. Suspect taken into custody following pursuit. It was a shooting at the Seagoville Correctional Facility, which is a federal correctional facility. The suspect fired a gun into the lobby of the Federal Detention Center. A suspect was taken into custody Friday following a pursuit and shooting at a federal correction facility in Seagoville. Around 2 p.m. Friday, the suspect, who was being pursued by Seagoville police, entered the Federal Detention Center at the Federal Correctional Institution at Seagoville and fired a gun into the front lobby, according to the spokesperson. The suspect was immediately detained and taken into custody by Bureau of Prison staff. The suspect, who had not been identified, is currently in custody at the Seagoville Police Department. I think this was a story worth noting because our Bureau of Prison staff, what did they do? They took the threat down immediately. You know why? Because they're trained to do that. Bravo to the FBOP. What do you think about that, Russ?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of thing you're going into a situation, has all the, earmarks, hallmarks of a potential, active shooter and things like that. That's the kind of training that you have to rely on to be able to stop that. There's none of us that are immune to this anymore. And these are the cases that, especially when you have personnel that are trained and they should be equipped and you should have a plan and everybody should know the plan. And everybody should be able to implement the plan. You have those things going for you, and guess what? You save lives.
And I'll tell you something, man. Seagoville's in Texas. Texas is no joke. Texas has my respect like you wouldn't believe. Hey, a little international news. In UK, coronavirus, 27 prisoners test positive across 14 UK prisons. Some 27 inmates have tested positive for coronavirus across 14 prisons, the Ministry of Justice has said. It comes after news that an 84-year-old man became the first British prisoner to die after contracting coronavirus. The inmate convicted pedophile, Edwin Hillier, was serving at HMP Littlehay in Cambridgeshire. Hillier, who reportedly had underlying health issues, died in hospital on Sunday, having been moved there from the Category C male sex offenders prison. A second serving UK prisoner, a 66-year-old male inmate at HMP Manchester, died in hospital on Thursday after contracting the coronavirus. He had been receiving end-of-life care for an underlying health condition before he tested positive for COVID-19. The prison service spokesman said an 84-year-old prisoner at HMP Littlehay died in a hospital on March 22nd. A 66-year-old prisoner at HMP Manchester died in a hospital on March 26th. It comes 3 days after prisons in England and Wales were put on immediate lockdown. I like that, man. You see that? Little different than how we reacted. It comes 3 days after prisons in England and Wales were put on immediate lockdown with all visits canceled. The Ministry of Justice and Her Majesty Prison and Probation Services said the measure was to ensure the safe and secure functioning of our prisons while enforcing social distancing. And the Prison Officers Association said it praised the decision to place prisons in England and Wales on immediate lockdown. So look at that. You have higher up making a decision, and they're supported by the unions. Do you think we get that a lot here in the U.S.?
No, we tend to get a lot of catering and pandering to the inmates. So, you know, bravo for them. But, you know, all of this stuff, depending on how long it goes on, we're going to have to come up with some longer term solutions. You can't just simply stay on lockdown indefinitely. But for right now, I think that's good. If we can get around that curve and start seeing some of these cases declining and feel like we've got a handle on it, we'll be doing that much better. Eventually, and this is going to go on for a while, we're going to start seeing staff that have been out sick start returning to work, and hopefully that will be a case where they're immune to it at that point, and maybe we can really start taking comfort in that. How far down the road that is, it's really hard to tell right now. One good thing is that it appears that the New York hospital rate of hospitalization is dropping steadily. So that's a good thing from this viewpoint. They were doubling their hospital admissions every 2 days, and then it dropped to 3.7 days, and now it's at 4.7 days. So there are some bright spots on the horizon.
Yeah, and I can't wait to start seeing those numbers level off, man. I'll be honest with you. It is nerve-wracking. By the way, guys, the coronavirus claims the life of the first NYC correctional officer. As we know right now, guys, Rikers has it hit hard. Rikers is the highest positive coronavirus cases, the jail itself. And the first city correctional officer died on Friday after contracting coronavirus. Officer Quincy Simpson, an 18-year veteran of the Department of Corrections, worked in the Security Operations Division at Rikers Island. Correctional Officer Simpson served our department with dignity and honor for nearly 20 years, said Correctional Officer Benevolent Association President Elias Hussamuddin. He embodied the very best qualities of New York's boldest and was extremely well liked by his fellow officers, Hussamuddin said. His tragic death from this invisible disease has left our hearts broken. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family during this difficult time. Our entire department is grieving, said Correction Commissioner Cynthia Brand. My deepest sympathies and heartfelt condolences go out to the officers' family, friends, and co-workers throughout the department. As of Friday, so this is March 27th, 80 correction department staffers have tested positive for coronavirus. You know, this articles like this kind of shake me up a little bit because this gentleman here looks to be healthy, looks to not have any underlying health issues, and Rikers has been hit hard. This kind of hits home because this is a gentleman that's close to my age, no underlying health issues, and the disease got the best of him. So, you know, first off, this is a wake-up call, but secondly, guys, this is a hero that we lost who, you know, just made the sacrifice, and hopefully this gets some form of recognition. But unfortunately, in today's day, right now, what we got going on, there's probably not even going to be a service for this hero.
Yeah, you know, that's a sobering detail, you know, that being able to, you know, give your last respects to someone like that, you know, who's been a valued employee, you know, who's put in that time, who's, you know, had to strive and show courage. And, you know, it's just going to kind of be a quiet affair. And, you know, my heart goes out to the family and stuff on something like that. And, you know, all we can really do is persevere on and hope that we can get through this thing and, you know, try and see that light at the end of the tunnel.
And the sad thing is sometimes the service isn't really for the person that passed. It's for the people that are left behind.
Yes, it makes, man, I really hate the word closure, but, you know, at least, you know, when you can get together with other people that knew that individual, they can understand your loss better than anyone else can.
Yeah. And, you know, again, kind of still staying with New York, New York is about ready to release 1,100 parole violators as the coronavirus spreads. Let's see. The Times Union, this comes from the Times Union, so again, it's coming out of Albany. As new cases and deaths from COVID-19 increased, Governor Andrew Cuomo on Friday ordered non-essential construction projects to stop, and a state agency told parole officers that 1,100 parole violators who are being held in jails and prisons across New York will be released. He's doing both the jails and the prisons. The parolees, who include 600 in New York City jails, will be returned to supervised release, according to people briefed about the State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision order. The Legal Aid Society said Friday that it went to court in the Bronx this week and secured the immediate release of 106 individuals who are being held at Rikers Island on non-criminal technical parole violations, many who, due to their age or underlying health conditions, are vulnerable to death or serious illness if affected with COVID-19. We've been doing this before. The immediate release, like, I understand you got people with bad health, age, but I know for a fact they're actually also going to push this to generalize low-level offenders. And in my opinion, I still don't think that's a great move. And the reason why is because you're pushing them back out into the community, where I think in the jail or prison, they'll be under better medical care than they would on the community, because they may not even go for the medical care. Or if you're on the jail level, you're pushing them into the prison system, which is still scrambling to take care of their own. You know, I'm not 100% big fan of just letting people out like this, but these happen to be just parole violators based on a technicality. So these are people that were actually in the community, and their violation could be something technical, not something, you know, not something criminal. So maybe I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is when you start pushing this now to the low-level offenders. What's your thought on that, Russ?
You know, I think really the part of the problem is that we're not really necessarily being told the totality of that. You see a lot of newspapers and radio news, television news that are just, you know, giving you the breakdowns, and they're not bothering to go into detail. Usually that kind of detail is left out by things like NBC News. But here I have a story here, and this one's really going to grab you, and this is why I think we're not being told necessarily the totality of the truth. California Governor Gavin Newsom on Friday commuted 21 prison sentences and pardoned 5 people who had already served their time behind bars, citing the coronavirus pandemic as a factor in his decision. 14 of the commuted cases involved murder or related charges. In 2 of the cases, the victims were children, and a pregnant woman was a victim in the other case. And they didn't go into much more detail after that, but doesn't that wake you up? That 14 of these people that they commuted their sentences were involved in murders. Tell me again how that's a nonviolent crime. I want that explained to me. I don't know about you, but I want it explained to me.
Well, I'll tell you something. People should actually see what they actually mean by nonviolent crime, because I'll tell you something. It's not simple low-level offenders. One day what we'll do is we'll break down a list of how some states classify nonviolent crimes, because there's a lot of nonviolent crimes that are serious in nature. And you know what's funny? Speaking of what you just said happened in California with kind of like that release of low-level offenders, there's an officer who's he has an article out. It's on a thing called Voices, and he's like, I worked at Rikers Island. Believe me when I say these inmates shouldn't be released into New York City. As a former correctional officer at Rikers Island, this is his words, and this is written by Ralph Ortiz. I can tell you that the island is one of the filthiest places you'll ever see. The cleaning crew at these facilities are the inmates themselves, and 75 cents an hour is no incentive for them to do the job right. Before starting work at Rikers, I was an emergency medical technician. I thought I had been exposed to everything. I believe that surely I built up a strong immunity to most bacteria. I was wrong. I began working as a correctional officer in August, and by December, I got really sick and had to use my annual days off. In other words, I wasn't surprised to hear that the coronavirus had made it onto Rikers Island. I worked at Otis Banham Correctional Center in a dorm setting where the maximum number of inmates we could house was 60. These are 60 men all living together in a tight space who are not practicing social distancing. There is nothing at Rikers Island that would help these inmates stay healthy. The inmates walk together to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They congregate in one large space when they have visitors and hang out together in the TV room. The single bar of soap they get won't be enough to sustain the need of constantly washing their hands. There are no sanitizers in the housing area nor in the hallways. Even the locker rooms for the officers were disgusting. Many times the soap dispensers did not have soap, and it was not uncommon for the officers to use the same soap the inmates were given. I won't lie and say the island was never clean. It was clean, just not professionally. The times I did see the inmates clean, I never saw them clean the bars, on the gates themselves, the metal detectors, the windows, the toilets. Let me just add something on that. If you're the officer and you're the supervising detail and you don't see the inmates do it, then you tell them to do it. Let me go back, but I had to get that out. Like, you're telling me you didn't see the inmates do it, but you're the, you know, if you're the detail officer or if you're an officer in an area, then you direct the inmates to do it. You know, they're going to do what you tell them to do. So that part of the story I'm not liking, but an unsuspecting inmate or officer would then open the gate or touch something which had been tainted, and then he or she would get sick. After I became ill, I bought a lot of hand sanitizer to make sure it never happened again. I would wipe the bars, keys, anything I may come in contact with. I believe that it's a good idea to close Riker Island. I believe that if you are a nonviolent offender, that you should not be held there until your case is settled. However, it's abundantly clear that New York City cannot provide the basic services to get Rikers Island clean. It has not been able to do it yet, and it certainly won't be able to do it in the middle of a pandemic when the city is epicenter. The mayor is now releasing into the city former inmates who will act as tiny bombs carrying a potentially deadly virus. When these bombs go off, that's when the nightmare will really begin. There's a jail on Rikers Island called North Infirmary Command, or NIC. This building is usually reserved for inmates who you cannot place in general population. These include inmates that may be physically handicapped, who are HIV positive, or inmates who suffer from sleep apnea and need a CPAP machine to sleep. When I was there, the entire building except for the first floor was empty. Those who have tested positive for coronavirus should be housed in that building now. Moreover, every inmate should be tested for the coronavirus before they are housed. The same way a woman gets a pregnancy test when she first walks through the door of Rikers Island, we should be able to test every single inmate coming into the jails for this virus. There are medical personnel at Rikers. They come from companies that have contracts with New York City, so testing the inmates should be easier than testing the general public. Using the prison resources like this will prevent a citywide disaster. Well, real quick, so I guess this guy's approached the fact that the jail is dirty, it's disgusting. You probably have a lot of inmates that have it already, and they're going to go ahead, and if you release them out early, they're going to go give it into the community. But you want to hear something, Russ? I was reading this today. Freed Rikers inmates are given cell phones, cab fare, and hotel rooms. Some inmates released from Rikers Island amid the coronavirus outbreak are being given free cell phones, cab fare, and even hotel rooms as they head out the door, according to sources at City Hall. This is a disgrace to all correctional officers, insane and dishonorable. City Department of Corrections source Rage to the Post on Friday. Mayor Bill de Blasio hasn't even given us masks to wear, let alone made sure we received masks. Another disgusted source familiar with the handout said he was surprised the inmates weren't given stretch limos. City Hall spokesman Cohen said inmates who are showing coronavirus symptoms are being given hotel rooms used by the Department of Homeless Services for isolation. Other inmates who are cut loose on work release are homeless and asymptomatic will also be given hotel rooms so they can be closely monitored in an isolating setting. The former jailbirds will be given prepaid flip phones so they can stay in contact with supervised release officials too. The city is also paying at some of their cab fares off Rikers Island. Avery said this is because those at risk of COVID-19 need to avoid public transportation. The city is paying for the measures, although the total cost is unclear. What's your thought on that? So now you have the news, you have them saying, okay, this is what we got going on. We're giving inmates cab fare, cell phones, and hotel rooms. And then they pretty much had an answer of each reason, like, okay, they're getting the hotel rooms because they're going to kind of be on self-quarantine. They're being given cab fare because in case they have the symptoms, you know, they can't go on public transportation. Well, a cab is still public transportation. I just want to say that. You could still affect the driver who's going to pick up a lot of different passengers. And then the cell phone is for them to call their person that's overseeing them. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just seems, you know, silly at the outset. They're doing all these things for them, and yeah, the cab fare, they're gonna leave all kinds of potential contagions behind on that, and it puts the driver in a bad spot and the next 10 passengers, and just the idea that you have to do so much for someone who has up to that done nothing but utilize a bunch of resources that could have better been spent elsewhere because they've been doing all these crimes and stuff. I just think that there's no sense of reality going on with our politicians. They don't really want rehabilitation. They want to tout it as something meaningful, but there's no accountability and there's no reality. There's no reality base to any of it. So, you know, I don't know what the answer to that is, except to slap a politician and say, hey, wake up. These guys, they have to become responsible. You know, they have to have a plan for getting out. maybe they should have someone that comes and visits them bring them the cell phone and give them a ride back to some place that they can quarantine for a few days. It just seems it's ridiculous.
I agree. And for them to say, public transportation, you could affect the cab driver. That's just, and then someone sent me an article today. I won't say his name, but the article is 7 prison employees test positive for COVID-19. Now, this is in Florida, but I want to read a little bit of the article, then I want to read something that he told me. And I'm curious to see if this is true. So if anybody watches this and they're from Florida, just hit up a yes or no when I read off what he said. So real quick, for Tallahassee, Florida, 7 Florida Departments of Correction employees who work at separate facilities across the state have tested positive for COVID-19, the respiratory illness caused by a novel coronavirus. Agency officials will not release the positions held by the infected prison workers, but in a statement said the employees either worked for the Corrections Department or one of its contractors at 5 prisons and 2 probation offices. The staffers work at the Century Correctional Institute in Escambia County, Everglades Correctional Institution in Miami-Dade County, Florida's Women Reception Center at Marianne Correctional Institution, both in Ocala, Zephyrillis Correctional Institution in Pasco County, and Community Corrections Regional Office in Lake Butler and West Palm Beach. The employees will not return to work until they have been cleared by health officials, the agency said. So after this person sent me the article, Russ, they also wrote down, they said the good old DOC sending them home and forcing them to use sick and personal leave instead of giving them administration leave. This includes anyone that came into close contact. Now, obviously, the policy that should be practiced by most states right now is if someone comes to work and they have symptoms or they've been confirmed to have the coronavirus, they go under separate leave and they're not being charged time. So for the department to send you home, and that this is true, and send you home on your own time, I kind of disagree with that. Correct, Russ?
Well, not just correct on that, Anthony, but when you look at what Florida's doing overall, just deciding that you're going to, trace contacts, and if they had any contact, that you're going to force these people to not only use their own time, but take them out of the workforce is ridiculous. You should look at, how much and what type of contact they had and render a decision on that. Right now, it just seems like there's a lot of reactionary things going on instead of reasoning it out and deciding, what the actual risk is. Because the truth about the risk is just because you walk someone by someone on the street, you're not going to get it. Now, if someone was in close contact, that would be another thing. But if they don't watch it, what they're going to do is they're going to run themselves out of a workforce. And when that happens, then they're really going to be strained. What will they do then? Have they thought this through? I don't think they have.
No, I agree. And the thing is universal precaution too. Like, I think a lot of people are concerned that once you realize you start sending people home on paid leave, that people will start abusing that. But the thing is, at this point, you just can't take that risk. You need to motivate people to do the right thing. And the best thing is that if you have symptoms or you have symptoms, let us know and we'll take care of you. Because the concern is going to be is, well, if I go home and I'm not being paid, I need the money. So you're not motivating them to come up and tell you they have concerns. And the other thing is when you have someone that's been confirmed with the coronavirus, then you have to go back now and check who this person had contact with. So yes, you may have to send 14, 15, 20, however many people home, but you're sending them home, and therefore they should be on some form of paid leave. That's just what most states are doing. But he also said this, though, about the limited movement. They started feeding 2 to a table and put up some ghetto hand washing stations using 15-gallon empty bottles of bleach and posted signs at main entrance advising people to use 6 feet social distancing. They're asking staff 3 questions when passing checkpoints, but no one is looking at temperatures. That's a problem. What's your thoughts, Russ, on that? They should be bare minimum taking those temperatures and asking those questions.
Well, yeah, if we're gonna screen staff, we have to be effective at it. We don't want people hiding their symptoms because they're afraid they're going to be sent home. We want people to be honest. We want people to be candid. More than that, we want to try and come up with a way to create a barrier between them and the rest of their peers and the inmate population. So, I mean, the best tool that you can possibly have really is something that's not subjective, like a quiz, or those 3 questions now, as they call them, but something that's more objective, like actually taking a temperature. So that's something that they should be doing. And I mean, it breaks my heart. It looks like they're just fumbling, and that they don't really have a plan. They don't have any cohesiveness. They haven't decided what they're going to do. And if they're doing that to their staff, I can only imagine what they're doing to the inmates with regards to not providing them training and information in order to, take some of the heat, some of the tension out of the situation. And that's only making it even more dangerous for staff. So, it just does not appear that they have thought this thing through. They need some real critical thinking skills, and they need a way to strategize about the situation, not just try and throw Band-Aids on every little sore that pops up.
Yeah, at this point, there's really no excuse, because this is a national epidemic or a national pandemic, and you got to see what the other states are doing. And right now, I would like to believe that most agencies are actually going to that paid leave and definitely doing those temperature checks. They're trying to exhaust all those preventive measures, because I'm going to tell you something. If you don't exhaust those preventive measures, there's going to be lawsuits that are going to come out of this. And the way you'll be protected is by making sure that you did what you could to prevent. Even though it's not 100%, you could still say, well, these are the things we did. But now to go ahead and say that you're not doing these temperature checks, which is a big thing right now, which is actually something that's been recommended by the CDC, you're opening yourself up to a hell of a lawsuit, because there will be lawsuits after this. I can guarantee you that, but hopefully most of the lawsuits will be frivolous as long as you get those protective measures in place. Again, nothing's 100%, but at least you're doing your best to, you're not being negligent. Now, our boy Elias Hussamuddin, we had him on the show recently. He mentioned that there was a floating jail. So he mentioned in our show first, and the Daily News just printed out that this is at Rikers. I remember, guys, we just talked about Rikers. Their numbers are overwhelming right now. A currently virus vulnerable prisoner-packed city jail barge should be turned into a floating hospital for ill Riker inmates, the corrections union boss told the Post. As COVID-19 hits New York City, more than 600 prisoners are incarcerated in close quarters on the Vernon C. Bain floating jail. Few New Yorkers know about the boat tied up off the South Bronx that some former inmates call a slave ship as part of Rikers. Correction Union Chief Elias Hussamuddin told the Post that he wants the boat turned into a hospital as soon as possible, so inmates who test positive at Rikers will be quarantined, and its 9,000 correctional officers will not be so vulnerable to the virus. This is what he says. Let's take the boat and retrofit it. Let's clean it up. We got both cell areas and dormitory areas on the boat. It could be an excellent facility for inmates who truly need to be isolated. Once they're out of quarantine, then they can go back to the other facilities on Rikers. Though more than 73 inmates and 58 employees have tested positive for the virus, the Department of Corrections would not provide specific information about the inmates at Bain, a motorless ship that was towed from Mississippi in 1992. Called the boat, the Lego-like ship has both cells and dormitories, but many inmates are in the closely packed dorms. The reality is we have the governor and mayor claiming we don't have enough hospitals to care for the people who have this virus. This is what Hussamuddin says. They better stop ignoring this population because it could have a horrible effect on the public. Our correctional officers don't have the luxury of working from home. They have to go in and out of the jail, which means they're going in and out of a population that could be infected. And he also said, Hussamuddin said the ship is not hospital compliant at present, and any modifications or repurposing may require higher staffing levels. And then it just talks a little bit about the boat. But you know what? If the boat's available, and honestly, it could be separated from GP, that's not a bad idea for a quarantine situation. It really isn't. And then you could just make sure that staff that's there has the proper protective equipment. This way you could stop the spread from hitting GP. And again, like you said, once they're cleared, they can go back. It's not a bad idea, right, Russ?
Yeah, kudos to Elias for at least coming up with a plan. That's once you have a good plan, and that does seem to be a good one, because that would truly be isolating the infectious contagion of the inmates that had it in one spot there. And then everyone would know that when when you have a guy that pops hot on the test, or they decide that, yeah, he has it, then he goes to that one spot. And it's a much better working condition, I would think. Now, what's entailed by, having to retrofit it or get it ready for some level of being a hospital, I don't know. But at the very least, you could use it as quarantine.
Yeah, and also could serve a future purpose too. So whatever money you invest in it, for a fact that you could also later use it as well. It's just, again, it's not going to be money that's going to be, spent on something frivolous. It's needed.
There's a lot of floating resources right now in New York, so that it's not going to be out of pocket of the department. Surely that there's some federal ventilators and doctors and whatnot hanging around that they could do what they needed to do on there, I would think.
Right, and then also Friday, South Carolina Department of Corrections has announced one of their correctional officers has tested positive for COVID-19. The agency said the officer was last at work on March 17th and has been in self-isolation for 10 days. Officials with SCDC said the officer worked in a special population housing unit at Broad River Correctional with 16 inmates. All inmates were in single cells and are asymptomatic. However, the inmates are being quarantined and monitored for the next 4 days in single cells to complete their 14-day monitoring period. Officials said the officers will not return to work until full recovery is documented. And according to the South Carolina Department of Corrections, this is the first employee within the agency to test positive for the coronavirus. Officials said no inmates have tested positive for COVID-19 at this time. Russ, as we do this is not, as we go through the coronavirus thing, this is not a bad idea to kind of do these updates, if not daily, like maybe just, every other day, because there's a lot of breaking stories here. This is actually interesting, Russ. I thought this was interesting. Wives of correction officers worried for their health. They don't want COVID-19 to spread into their home. So this was actually done by NBC Channel 5 or NBC 5 News, and this is out of Vermont and New York. And basically it just says some families are doing whatever they can to self-quarantine, but it may not be enough to stay healthy. They say because their loved ones are correctional officers. Amanda Correa says her husband has a thankless job and she already worries for his safety when he goes to work. Now, with the spread of COVID-19, it puts some added stress on their home life. This is what she says. The fact that I have to now worry about the safety of my family who's quarantined makes me even more nervous because I'm doing everything at home that I can do to protect my family, but I can't now because my husband can bring this home and affect us all. She and other wives like Jennifer Giddings are worried about things like social distancing and personal protective equipment in correctional facilities. They need N95 masks just as much as our healthcare system does. I mean, they have to be protected. What is going to happen when the virus gets through all of corrections? Who's going to take care of these inmates? Hey, you know what's funny about this, Russ, to be honest with you? As we were going through this, I kind of agree with the wives on this. I felt like that as we were going through this, yes, there were a lot of resources given to the streets, out there, like the first responders out there, medical out there. And I think we were kind of an afterthought until people started realizing, like, holy shit, what happens if this enters the prison system? And then they're like, oh my God, this is going to spread like wildfire. And they just didn't think of us at first. I think we really were an afterthought. But I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of like that thing where we get fought about last, even though we have one of the most critical missions out there. Safety just is, or I would say society is just not going to be safe unless we're keeping, the wolves inside the pen. So I don't know why people think about us last. That's not the way they should be thinking about things at all.
Right. And then a couple more little stories real quick. The Pennsylvania Union, along with Rikers had the same concern here. They're concerned about a shortage of protective gear because they're getting a lot of the inmates that are coming from New York City. Officials said staff at the U.S. Penitentiary at Canaan have about 2 weeks worth of PPE for personal protective gear before they run out. Now, this comes out of Wayne County, PA. As the coronavirus continues to spread, staff at the U.S. Penitentiary at Canaan are working with a dwindling supply of personal protective gear that seems unlikely to last until a backlog order for more arrives, according to the union representative of correctional officers at the Wayne County Prison. Dealing with something like this is unprecedented. Nothing like this has ever happened, said Jeremy Domick, the unit president. But our union's main concern is staff safety, and the guidance from the central office is very vague. It's open for interpretation for each individual institution. As the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 surged Friday in Pennsylvania to more than 2,200, Dominic said the staff have about 2 weeks worth of personal protective equipment, also called PPE, like gowns and masks, before they run out. Reorders are backlogged for several weeks because the items are in high demand everywhere, especially hospitals. We're doing our best to keep our staff safe with what we have. It's a very scary situation for staff and inmates. Scott Taylor, spokesman for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, says all cleaning, sanitation, and medical supplies have been inventoried at each of its 122 facilities, and an ample amount of supply is on hand and ready to be distributed or more to any distributed to any facility as deemed necessary. The Bureau of Prisons is prepared to address and supply concerns as necessary. So far, there are no confirmed cases of COVID among the staff or inmates at USP Canaan. The union concerns come amid a nationwide crunch for protective gear used by medical personnel, emergency responders, and law enforcement. Now, on March 20th, U.S. Senator Bob Casey sent a letter to the Bureau's director, Michael Carvajal, addressing safety concerns he has at federal prisons during the coronavirus pandemic. Among his concerns is their supply of PPE. Casey said the Bureau had not replied to his letter on Friday. Local federal prison union officials are also concerned by the intake of inmates from the New York City, where confirmed coronavirus cases quickly approached 40,000 Friday. Last week, the American Federation of Government Employee Council of Prisons Local C33 released a statement that they would receive about 40 inmates from a federal facility in Brooklyn, New York. Most of the inmates would be held at USP Canaan. The union said the transfer carries a risk of disease spread and could put more than 400 employees and more than 1,300 other inmates at risk. Several inmates who came from New York were quarantined, Dominic said. The Bureau said previously that it may move inmates to better manage bed space and ensure that facilities do not become overcrowded. If an inmate has no symptoms and a temperature of less than 100.4 degrees, the inmate can be transferred according to the Bureau. So the thing here is that they're not going to transfer them if they're symptomatic, but I still think that's still going to be a concern. New York is a hot spot, and now you're taking these inmates and you're going to transfer them over to PA. I actually could understand the concern for this union, but they're talking about bed space and stuff. But even if the inmates, you could have inmates that are asymptomatic. That's a tough call. I think if they're going to wind up transferring some of those inmates, especially because New York's a hot spot, they definitely need that protective gear. What's your thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, I don't know that now is the right time to be shipping inmates around when we already have the big concern with our supply chain and the number of supplies and masks and face shields and everything we have. There's some bright spots, on the horizon where very shortly they're going to, hopefully in the next month, be rolling out some point of contact tests where they'll be able to do these tests in just a few minutes, and it won't be in a lab. It'll be decentralized. That's going to help. I really feel that some of these facilities and some of these departments need to wait for some of that stuff to get fielded before they just decide, that they're gonna just start shuffling people around. For some reason, a lot of corrections departments just feel that that's the answer to everything, is to start shuffling bodies, when oftentimes that's the worst thing they can do.
Right, I got one last story, by the way. Oh, by the way, also the Attorney General, was it William Barr? Is that his name, William Barr? He's
Yes.
also thinking to release inmates from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. My boy Dan Wise did a show on that recently and kind of breaks it down. He has a channel called RDAP Dan. But one last story I want to discuss. I thought that this was pretty interesting. This happened in South Dakota. And by the way, actually South Dakota and also Yakima, Washington had 2 prison escapes or jail escapes. And well, South Dakota I think South Dakota is a prison escape. Yakima, Washington is a jail escape. We'll go through them both, but they're basically using the coronavirus as a reason why they were escaping. And they almost caught all the inmates that escaped from Yakima, Washington jail. Let me just, there it goes, jailbreak. Let me read this off first real quick. So this is an update. Okay, they got all 14. So all 14 are back in custody. So let me just share this. I want to share this in my group because I didn't have that. but this is what happened. I thought this was pretty it's a pretty interesting story here. The 14 inmates who escaped from the Yakima County Jail on Monday evening are all behind bars. Gavin Duffy, Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal for Eastern Washington, says the final inmate, 31-year-old Fernando Gustavo Castaneda Sandoval, was captured on Friday at around noon in the Yakima County town of Wapato. It was thanks to Crime Stoppers tips and good police work. The credit goes to the partner agencies who were involved in these arrests. The U.S. Marshal Violent Offender Task Force, Yakima County Sheriff's Office, Yakima Nation Tribal Police, and Yakima County Fire District 5 responded to the 3100 block of S. Wapato Road, where Castaneda Sandoval was located, hiding in residence. The task force approached the residence. Castaneda Sandoval appeared in a doorway, slammed the front door shut. Then the U.S. Marshal Service immediately locked down the residence and called for additional resources to be sent to the location. After a brief standoff, the task force says Castaneda Sandoval exited the residence and was taken into custody without incident. According to U.S. Marshal Service, he's also a registered sex offender who failed to report when out of custody. 8 of the 14 escaped inmates were captured on Monday night, shortly after they busted down a fire door, making a daring escape. And then 5 of the remaining 6 were captured on Wednesday and Thursday, and the final fugitive was back in custody as Friday morning. I'm actually going to show you a video real quick. That's the escape.
Man, this was dipped out, They left on the popo. Damn. My niggas. This is our out. Yee. Run, homies, run!
Hey, Russ, I want to read one more and then get your thoughts on this. But there was another escape that happened at a female facility, and I believe it was in South Dakota. And let's see, South Dakota inmates escaped from coronavirus-stricken jail. 9 women escaped from a South Dakota jail where a fellow inmate tested positive for coronavirus. The inmates broke out of the minimum security Pierre Community Work Center late Monday by walking out an exterior door, the South Dakota Department of Corrections said Tuesday. 3 of the women, identified as Kelsey Flute, 30, Jordan Wakeman, 27, and Pamela Miller, 28, were apprehended Tuesday after a search that included aircraft operated by the South Dakota Highway Patrol. The women left the jail on the same day the South Dakota Department of Health announced a confirmed case of COVID-19 at the Pierre Women's Prison. Governor Kristi Noem said the 9 women who escaped, rather than 8, initially announced by correction officials, were housed in the same unit as the inmate diagnosed with COVID-19, but it's unclear how close the women have been to each other. One of the inmates had been apprehended in Rapid City by early Tuesday and was back in custody at the Pettit County Jail, the newspaper reports. The inmates have been tested for coronavirus, but results are still pending. Now, the remaining inmates being sought have been identified by NBC News as Philomene Boneshirt, 25, Sylvia Redleaf, 25, Alice Richards, 32, Kayla Lamont, 28, and Carly Shonin, 23. Authorities in Washington State, meanwhile, were searching Tuesday for 6 of 14 inmates who broke out of Yakima County Jail. That's what we just talked about. Hey, Russ, but real quick, that's also, the fear also comes from the news sensationalizing it, and now look what's happening. Look how that fear is now affecting the facilities where they're so afraid they're escaping, or they could be using that excuse just to kind of try to justify their escape. But either way, you know, my thing is that most likely you have 2 concerns. You have inmates that are going to use it for their advantage, which we have to be wary of, or you could have the news just sensationalizing it to the point where you have to tell them, hey guys, calm down because look what you're doing to the population. And now staff has to handle that. Correct, Russ?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to unpack right there because, you know, it can be everything from not enough manning, not enough staffing because of the coronavirus, to them taking advantage, to staff being fearful to do their jobs and not searching enough, not doing enough detection work. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. It's just, it's what we've been served up though. and it's what we're going to have to deal with.
I agree. Hey, Russ, you have any closing thoughts? You think we should do stuff like this again?
Absolutely, man. Current breaking news, and hopefully at some point we will eventually get to a show where we won't even mention Corona.
I hope so. And Russ, by the way, I'm going to use that picture that you gave me from that's about 30 years ago when you were in that uniform.
Okay, well, we'll go with that. I'm young at heart, Anthony.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. All right, Russ. Hey, thanks for obviously being the best guest ever. And as always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. And guys, if you are interested in having us do these, updates, let us know. We'd be more than honored to do so. As always, guys, stay safe.